Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S lifeline. And today, sitting on the stoop, we are going to get the scoop with Gene Moran. He's the founder and president of Capital Integration, is an expert on federal defense lobbying, measuring client results in billions of dollars. Gene's policy has been implemented by Congress, the president, and executive branch. His pursuit of innovation gained him multiple accolades, including being named twice the top lobbyist by the National Institute of Lobbyists and Ethics, the Society of Advanced Consultants of the Year, inductee in the $1 Million Consulting Hall of Fame, and multiple times as a top performer lobbying firm by Bloomberg government. He's a published author, and we're going to be talking about today, Make Your Move. Charter your post-military career. And he also was a captain in the United States Navy. For our non-Navy folks, that's equivalent to a 06, which is a colonel, but we're going to talk about that. And he also was a commander, a cruiser and destroyer. Greetings, Gene. How we doing today?
I'm doing great, boy. After you hear your life flashed in front of you with an intro, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here. I hope we can help some people.
Man, so this is great. So like I was sharing with you, I said when I had to make that transition, books like this, I didn't know, as being a senior non-commissioned officer, it just like, I figure it out, right? It's going to be easy. I did this in the military. I could do this on the other side. But you have a list on how to be successful in the transition.
Well, I think what you describe is pretty common, that military people are often left to figure it out. Of course, there are procedures and checklists, and people have gone before us, but we feel like we're pretty good at figuring it out. But the challenge when you leave active duty, and there are many challenges, but when you go into the free and open market, there are so many other ways of looking at situations and understanding things and perspectives on things. Sometimes our military perspective is really too narrow, and it can actually be limiting if we let it be. There are a lot of attributes that are fantastic, but sometimes our perspective is too narrow, and we're not even aware of what we're missing in our assessment of this new environment.
Right. So when you sat down after you transitioned to veteran status, you have multiple authors of multiple books. What made you sit down and say, you know what, I need to help fellow veterans understand that they are valued, that talent is needed on the other side, and it's time for you to make your move? What made you come up with that title?
It's a great question. I had a pretty easy transition, quite honestly. I had some unique skills that were readily translated into a defense company's needs. I had an understanding of Washington and how DoD interacted with Congress. That made me attractive to some defense companies. So getting a job was not difficult. That's not always the case for everybody. Sometimes you have to work at it a little harder, but it was almost too easy. And as a result, I went into it really for a few years before I started to recognize that, maybe this fit isn't so great. And when I did make the break from my first and only corporate job, that was at the 5-year mark. Most people make that at about the 3-year mark. They'll go into something and then move to something else because they'll have a similar recognition that they might not have chosen as well as they could have. There are many aspects of the job that were fantastic. The pay is great. The hours are different. It's a new environment, but that does wear off after a bit. When I went out on my own was when I had time to reflect that my experience was similar to what others in my network were experiencing. A general lack of fulfillment with the job, whatever the job in the defense company might be. They're smaller than what we expect of people on active duty. It's just how the jobs are defined for the most part. And I'm talking about corporate roles. Um, it can be difficult to find the kind of fulfillment and satisfaction. But I started to achieve tremendous success as an independent lobbyist and consultant, and that was the point where I began to recognize I should capture this story, if for no other reason to help inspire others that there's a few different ways to do this. I think there's a misperception in civil society in general that all veterans are wounded in some way, that we're all wounded warriors, and and we're not. Um, some are, and some are quite legitimately wounded with visible and invisible wounds, but not everyone is, and they can't all be treated the same way. And so I thought that, okay, my story is a little bit different, and it might have unfolded in a way that could appeal to a certain bandwidth of the veteran community. And so it was a bit of a passion project. There's no money in books. Anybody that's written books will tell you that. Even if you have a New York Times bestseller, you're not going to retire on that money.
Right.
But I enjoyed the catharsis of writing it and publishing it, and we can talk about Freedom Fighter Outdoors. They were an initial partner in that I wanted a connection with them, such that I wasn't ever going to make any money from it, and if it took off and went big, that money would go to Freedom Fighter Outdoors, and that's the arrangement that's in place.
Wow. You start off the book by mapping your way. That's like the first chapter. You coming out and say, before you can even know what you want to do, or have a direction. 'Cause we talked about earlier, right? Is being that lighthouse, right? Especially as a Navy commander. you know, I look at it as mapping your way because, out in the ocean is huge. It's a vast, vast place. And then when it's dark out there, the only light you have is the light that's on the ship, right? Yeah, unless if you see a
Most
lighthouse and you say, hey, we're going in that direction. Because sometimes, as a transition service member, like for me, I was lost. I was in the middle of an ocean and didn't know which way to go. I didn't know if I was going towards land. I didn't know if I was, like, but once I see somebody share with me about, hey, have you looked into cybersecurity? You was in law enforcement. How about looking into law enforcement, but digitally? I was like, wow. And I started to look into that. So walk us through the first chapter where you talk about mapping your way.
Yeah, I have had dozens of people seek my counsel as they were on the cusp of transition, or shortly after they transitioned, and they were maybe not sure which track to choose. There are typically multiple options available to any veteran, and if you feel like there aren't, then that's a signal that you need to be asking more people for some help, because there are just too many opportunities in this country. Um, I almost always begin a conversation with somebody seeking help with, how long do you think you want to work? Because most haven't really thought about what's the amount of time you think you're trying to fill here. There's books and talk about, what's your number? What number do you have to get to in order to retire comfortably? Some of us don't have a clear thought of how many working years we have, or how few working years we have remaining. And when you start to look at it like that, as a finite thing, then you might make different decisions about how much of your time do you want to spend on that. Uh, we can all have a great plan, but external factors and the grace of God are going to have something to do with that. The odds are it's not going to be of your choosing. If it is, that something very sad happened. Um, but I like to ask that sort of philosophical question of, how much time are you trying to fill? If you're retiring after 20 and you're at, age 40 or early 40s, you may have 25, 30 more working years that you could work if you maintain your physical health, if you want to. I have many peers who are in their 70s and 80s doing some kind of work I say peers, professional peers. They may not work 9 to 5 every day, but they're mentally engaged and they're producing revenue doing something, even if it's just a small consulting arrangement. But you've got to have some kind of plan. So with that timeline, there's also typically a number that you do need to get to retire comfortably. We've been talking about Social Security being at risk for a long time. The beauty of being a veteran, if you did retire, is that you have access to health care that nobody else has. And that allows tremendous flexibility. Not everybody has that. I appreciate that. For those that don't, health care and those benefits are really what hold people in place, often far longer than they should be in place. They need to get a job because they need the benefits to protect their family. I totally understand that. But if you were fortunate to get to a retirement status and do 20, you have that major piece figured out, which opens up just all sorts of flexibility for you to go somewhere else and negotiate your compensation differently, or to work for yourself and start something new. There's thanks to Shark Tank and the the internet and now AI, excuse me, there's all sorts of opportunity to go out and start your own thing. Let me take a breath there and see if you want to pull any of those threads.
Yeah, sure. So when you said it's because I'm trying to dig back in and remember when I did my transition of Map Your Way. Somebody they asked me like, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to serve? I knew I didn't want to be in law enforcement per se anymore. And they say, well, what else is your passion? What do you like to do? Well, I say, well, I like talking to people. It's like, well, have you looked into podcast? I'm like, oh, no, I can't do that. That's when the imposter syndrome set in and, of trying to find somebody or that's in that environment already just to kind of start picking their brain, right? Like to see if that's something that you could fall into. And one of the things that, I have a lot of young veterans, some of them didn't make it to the retirement age, right? So they was like, well, what I'm going to do now is like, okay, well, let's use your skill set. And you talk about finding your guides, right? Like, it's like the parameters, like, what are you good at? Let's focus on that so that transition could be a little bit better. And then once you're in that space, you could kind of branch out from there. So when you refer to finding your guides, was that what you was referring to?
Well, there are what I think veterans tend to do is just follow those that went before them. Joe's been successful doing whatever he does, and I think I can do that. And he makes good money, and I can make that kind of money. That's a safe way to go, but it's probably based on some self-limiting belief that I can't do these other things that are over here, because if you've never looked at them, you don't even know if you can do them or not. There are people who can be guides. There are career paths that can guide you. Your network can help you. But I think if you were to sort your network by, somebody who could potentially hire me, somebody who could refer me, and somebody who's just a good friend and not of any particular use in the job market, you'll quickly see the buckets sorted out of what are some of the obvious opportunities. Now, if you don't have the health benefit covered another way, and you do have a family to look out for, yeah, you need to be paying attention to that near-term opportunity. It doesn't mean that you can't do something on the side to help develop yourself and invest in additional skills that you may need to get in order to get the best opportunity in the civilian space. Something I learned that we all come to recognize at some point is that throughout our time in the military, we're being invested in. We're going to schools. We're being given opportunities. We're being given leadership opportunities. We're given responsibility and accountability that comes with that. And so these are things that help us grow. When you go into the civilian workforce, not all companies have the same capability to help you learn a new skill set, or to teach
Right.
you, or to to give you the kind of leadership opportunity that you may aspire to. That you have to invest in some of those things yourself, sometimes out of your own pocket. So Uncle Sugar may have been paying for it when you're on active duty, but now you may have to be the one that pays for it. And that may hurt a little bit, but if it can open up a new set of doors for you because now you're certified in whatever the skill is, that's a that opens new opportunities for you that will pay better compensatory dividends just a couple of years down the road. So imposter syndrome, I believe, is overcome by investing in skills that will develop your confidence and improve your marketability.
Right. And so one of my questions would actually, as being a subject matter expert as yourself and write multiple books, you put in there, keep your focus. And I'm laughing because I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I said, well, let me try this. Let me dabble in this. Let me dabble in that. And my focus was all over the place. I wasn't locked in onto one specific thing. And I remember, my parents said, like, if you have so many, it's like on the computer, right? If you have so many tabs open, right, your computer runs slower, right? So how about close down some of the tabs so your computer could run at an optimum rate, right? So is that a fair statement? Like keeping your focus is what you mean? Well, somebody's trying to transition to a different career space.
So there's a couple of aspects to it. One is that if you're multitasking, your brain power is being divided. We may think that kids can uh, play games and listen to music and be texting with a friend and doing it well, and they may be, but they could be doing it better if they were focused on the one thing. Uh, if you're scattered across the multiple uh, efforts, what you're losing is time. You're not going to recapture the time that you're wasting by not doing whatever it is well, and moving with discipline toward a bigger objective. And so I try to help people see that you can do a lot in a given day. You can do a lot in a given week. Sometimes you just have to maybe set a timer for 20 minutes to do this, and don't spend any more time on it than that. Don't try to get it to 110%, get it to 80%. Uh, if you do that 8 or 10 times through the day, you can accomplish a lot. Some people need to be sort of shown how to discipline their time like that. But if you're trying to do too many things at once, you won't do them as well as you could, and you will lose that time that is just, it's not possible to reclaim it.
Right. Cause you told like, wow, you ever, and for the listeners out there and for the ones that have you ever sat down behind your computer, it's like 8 o'clock and next thing you know is 12:30. Like what just happened? Like where did the 4.5 hours go? You can't recall like, cause you're doing so many different things at once.
It's drift, and if you let that drift creep into your day, you're wasting all kinds of time. You need to have some sort of planning system. Whether it's task lists, Google Tasks is something I use. Time blocking is a time and tested method. Color coding your calendar, and if you're finished, I still struggle with this. I've been retired from the Navy since 2008, but sometimes when I'm finished, it's hard to just step away. I mean, I'm running a 7-figure business. There's always something to be done, but does it really have to be done right now? Can it wait? And if it's scheduled at an appropriate time, that's good enough for it to be complete for now. You don't have to try to get it all done. But that drift at your desk that's a killer. It sucks life out of you, sucks energy out of you, and it takes time away. Something that's not in the book, but that I learned only in the last few years, was how to be aware of and to track my energy. Where does my energy go? And I went through sort of a disciplined process of tracking it for a month, of what are the things that I'm doing, and you have to sort of keep a diary of this. You can do it electronically, but what gave me energy, what was fulfilling, what sucked energy, what it helped me see in running my own business are things that I should be letting go of and outsourcing to somebody else because they're not bringing me happiness. They don't make me money, and somebody else can do it a lot better for a lot less than it's costing me in time. So just different ways to look at some of the tools that are available that could help you maintain some better focus in your day to day.
And that's key. So the implement planning portion of the book that talks exactly what you mentioned about the different sheets and how do you structure your day, because a scattered brain gets you nowhere, right? If it's locked in and focused and like you said, hey, it's a task, line it out, okay, move on to something else. If it's you know, so you can have that structured environment.
Well, here's a test that anybody can do. It's a Bill Gates saying that we, excuse me, overestimate what we can do in a year, and we wildly underestimate what we can do in 10 years. If you look back over just the last year and write down everything that you've done that you're proud of or that you invested in and took time, if you write those things down, go back 1 year, then try going back 3 years, and then go back 10 years. And, you have to be of a certain age to have some meaningful things. But then if you try to look forward to see, could I even imagine what that list could look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I say this all the time. When I retired in 2008, I was 45, 46 years old. No way in the world could you have told me that I would be, recognized as a top lobbyist, had written 6 or 7 books, gotten a PhD. They weren't even in my scope. They weren't even on my scope. And it's because I hadn't yet become imaginative enough about what could be out there for me. And then these became things that I chose to do and invest time in. I also teach at Florida State University. I teach 2 remote courses. That was not on my scope, not something I was looking for, but I developed additional skills and opened doors that allowed new things to happen that bring all kinds of fulfillment. Before this recording of the podcast, I was on a session with students, an Ask Me Anything session, we call it. So even in a remote course, I was making myself available as an adult who's lived decades more than they have about what are some opportunities that they want to think about that they may choose for career paths of their own. Any veteran has perspective that is so different from what their civilian contemporaries have just because of what they've done, where they've been, the people they've interacted with, the cultures they've seen. These are very, very differentiating attributes that a veteran brings into a new situation. I know I'm moving around on you a little bit here, but people need to think much more fully about what they can do, what they are capable of doing, and what they might want to do. And you have to dream a little bit.
And that's what it comes down to, get experience, right? Jay, you just mentioned, right? So as a military person, you come in, say you come in at 18, 19, 20 years old. You stay for 6 to 8 years. Usually that's usually the demographics, right? Usually do one enlistment, maybe 2, or one for officers. They do their 10 years and then probably do something else. There's a small percentage that make it to retirement or that stays for retirement. But that get experience, right? So you have between 18 to 25 now, you come in at a low level, but by the time you leave, like you said, you could run a small company, a Fortune 500 company. You have commanders and as you was a commander for a destroyer, like how many people was on the vessel?
Destroyer is about 350. A cruiser is about 400 with an air wing.
So on the civilian side, that's running a company of a 400 payroll. Like people don't realize that aspect of it. For me in the law enforcement, I'm like, wow, I'm 20 years old now. I'm in charge of life, liberty, death. I have a weapon. I have to know the rules of engagement, the use of force, and that's huge responsibility, especially on the enlisted side. You could be a logistics officer or a logistics technician moving millions of dollars. You're operating a vehicle that costs millions of dollars. You transferring information, so that get experience is something that we already have. We just don't know how to translate that experience to the civilian sector. So what's some of the insights that you could share with somebody that's about to transition about that get experience aspect?
Well, what comes with that experience in the military culture is the understanding of what it means to be accountable. And so maybe very early on, a few people are late to things or events, or they, get in fights and get in trouble. But typically those people don't last. And so you very quickly understand that there are rules to the environment that we live in, and that we're all contributing to this thing that's bigger than us, and we're expected to do that. That does come with time in the civilian world, but it doesn't come as fast. And so you might be lacking in technical experience, but you can gain technical experience at any point along the way. And what you can't gain is the experiences of having had to interact with people that you don't like or you don't agree with, or you didn't hire. Right, in the military, you get the team that was assigned to the same place, right? And there are going to be some people that maybe you don't click with, but you got to figure it out. And in the civilian world, some of those people are still playing games and politics and trying to outmaneuver somebody. And you're, as a veteran, you're typically above that form of personal conduct, and it does resonate. And leaders of companies, once they see it in their veterans and prospective hires, they understand it. But that there's a period of discomfort when there's uncertainty in the mind of the veteran of, can I do this? That's the natural human response. But you have the discipline to apply oneself and, get through the test, right? Everybody fears, going to boot camp or going through whatever basic level training, who's going to wash out or roll back and have to do it again. You you figure out that if you apply yourself, you're going to get through it. And the same holds in the civilian world.
And you shared, so when you're transition, you say you really didn't have a hard transition because you had a segue, to go into your next adventure after the military. I'm sure that happened by a great reputation, right? Like your character was above reproach. Like people knew the type of person you were, the skill sets that you bring, your work ethic, and what you bring to the table to bring you onto their team. Right. So I know that's one of the pain points that are like, hey, you need to have a good reputation, because that reputation is what's going to get you to that next phase.
Well, and it still applies in my work today. Every client I have has come from a personal referral. Every single one. I don't sell a commodity. I sell advisement and trust and credibility and expected capacity and outcomes. It's expected that I can help companies produce outcomes. That you only get referrals if you're making it happen and getting it done, and making other people feel good and have their companies be successful. It's the same thing as in the military, right? We all know who wasn't carrying their load, and who the slacker was, and over time they get pushed aside, and the system long term, that military system works. It's up or out, and it's unusual nowadays for somebody to get too far past their capabilities. Let's say, but it's quite possible in the civilian world to see people advanced and in positions far beyond their capability because they had some relationship. I used to say, in the military, we know that there's a board selection opportunity that's coming up, and we get our record all, properly presented to the board,
Yes.
and there's recommendations in there, and you've earned your credentials that should make you eligible for the next whatever the opportunity is. But sometimes in the civilian world, that board took place on the 6th tee, 4 Saturdays ago, and you didn't even know the conversation was happening.
Right.
And
Right.
some of it's about, do you understand the process that you're a part of?
Wow. And a process that you're a part of. One of the, I guess, one of the positives here that I'm thinking of in the book when I read about, you said, know your leadership. So, what I thought about when I was reading that portion of the book, like, know your leadership. I was like, well, every time I change duty stations, right, I'll go to a new unit. The first thing I used to do is like, hey, what's the mission? What's the vision of the unit? What's the mission? What's the vision of the group? And what's the mission and vision of the wing, right? Because I need to know, like you said, how to produce, how to stay on the team, right? Like how to be the first one they reach out to. And this is another skill set that, stuff that we have been, it, it's been woven within us, right? Every time we go to a new location, new duty, falling me for new command, we have to know what the commander wants. So what are they envision? So how are we going to make sure that is being achieved? And you put in there,
So
get to know your leadership.
something you're not worrying about on active duty is who controls my compensation. Whereas in the civilian world, those corporate objectives are certainly important, and producing outcomes and getting the job done, that's important. But an extremely important person in your life is the person, and it's usually one person who has complete control over, are you going to get the next raise or not? And these things do matter to a degree because we all want to be fairly compensated, but often we're not, and it's for frivolous reasons that have little to do with our actual performance. Often it's something political or personal that's getting in the way that just wouldn't be a factor on active duty. I don't say that to be negative about civilian jobs, and there are many, many companies with great cultures, but it's a learning point to know when you're being hired in, who has control of that decision about my future, because it's going to affect my family as well. And it's very well documented that jobs across the same pay band can pay very differently based on how you were introduced, what brought you to the company, what skill set do you have, who do you know, maybe who are you related to, were you part of an acquisition, did you go to one company and that company was acquired? There are subtleties about how compensation works the more senior you get in the civilian world. And we just don't get exposed to that as a veteran or while on active duty. We're not exposed to that enough.
Right. And when we come into practice diplomacy, you know, yeah, I tell you that sometimes it's a sticky topic, but practice diplomacy, like it's it's different on the, like you said, in the civilian sector.
I'll just share a couple of things. On active duty, and I was in the Navy. When you have command of a ship, you have absolute control within a framework that's understood. Within the waterfront area, among other ships, there's an understood seniority, and this occurs in the other services as well. Um, small port, big ship, senior officer, you have some throw weight around town, so to speak, and you can get things done. That may or may not translate so well into a civilian position. That throw weight you might have had as a senior officer doesn't necessarily translate to somebody who came up a different path to get to the same civilian level you're at. They worked a different path, and so they can't necessarily relate. And they're different but equal. And I'll be perfectly candid. I was not great at the office dynamics thing. I felt like I had an understanding of how things worked, and I did know my job well and was expert at that, but I didn't have visibility on some of the other aspects of the leadership dynamics that occur in any company, and I think many veterans deal with this to some degree. Uh, so learning how to be diplomatic is, that's one aspect of it. As an independent uh, company owner now, working with other companies, I can often come into a corporate situation and understand pretty quickly where do they have a need? What is the real need? They have a stated need, but what's the real need that they haven't quite wrapped their head around? There's a reason they're calling me in. Um, I have to be thoughtful about how I help them see what the problem is. I can't just go in and say, "Hey, this is all screwed up." You shouldn't. Why are you doing this? You can do that, but it's pretty aggressive, and it can be grating on people, and it doesn't endear you for them to want to work with you when they can choose from many others, and you could lose the opportunity. So, helping companies that might be struggling to see that, hey, there's another way to look at the problem. Have you thought about this? And here's what I learned over here working with the Jones Company, and they do it this way. Could something like that work here? And there are different aspects of diplomacy in the civilian setting that in on active duty we just know this is how it is. This is how we do it, and we're not here to question.
Right.
Unless it's something highly unusual. Questions are not usually welcome.
Yeah, and you talk about taking ownership. Yeah, that was one thing that I pride myself on. It's like, if it's right or wrong, take ownership. Hey, yes, I messed up. I didn't, overlook this, and this is what I'm doing to correct that action.
You know, um, it's a funny word because it triggers people sometimes about when you say I own that person. Uh, Obviously, you don't own them, but in the military, we understand that we own the challenges that that person is dealing with. So if they're having a domestic problem, there are ways that you can be helpful in the military that are allowed uh, to give somebody time off or get them some special help with counselors or something like that. There just are situations that demand, hey, somebody's got to get involved or somebody's going to get hurt here. So we want to help, and we own that problem, right? They're part of our crew. So we'll try to get them that help. In the civilian world, you may not have that freedom to be so intrusive in somebody's personal life. In fact, it's highly unusual that you could just do or say or direct somebody to go get help. Um, there's a there's a whole HR protocol that needs to be followed, and there are reasons for that. Uh, there's corporate liability that has to be considered, and there are personal rights and freedom that have to be considered that are just different in the military. But the mindset of feeling like you own the problem and the problems that your people in corporate America are dealing with, I think that's a healthy mindset to bring in. You know, Joe's having a problem at home. He's told me, he needs some time off, or he's got a child that's got an issue that you know maybe you need to bend the rules a little bit to help them get the time they need to figure something out, or death in the family. In the military, we have some protocols for how to deal with those things fairly
Right.
quickly and consistently. They don't all exist in the civilian world, and if you if you adopt the mindset that I do own the situation and I want to be helpful, just be mindful that there's some rails that you can't cross, and you can be a leader without being intrusive.
And that's when embracing growth. It's hard to go from if you're doing something for a while to transition, and now you got to embrace that new job, that new opportunity, that new way of life?
Yeah, it took me a while to figure it out, and I wasn't alone. I mean, as I said at the beginning of the pod here, that I came to recognize that others were kind of lamenting some of the same issues, but I wasn't hearing it in the early years. When I came to recognize it in retrospect, I could see that you know, yeah, this is a transition point. You can't make it go completely away. I mean, it is a different life and lifestyle that you're going to have in post active duty, and I don't think there's anything that can directly translate to the kind of um, teamwork and fulfillment and camaraderie that comes with working in military units. I have not seen that. It doesn't mean that there can't be other ways to seek fulfillment, but you have to make those commitments to yourself, to your family. You need family support to be able to do some of these things. But if you make those investments in growth for yourself, I mentioned, academic growth for me helped. Um, I also attended a lot of coaching seminars. I mentioned Alan Weiss in the book, who I came to know more personally, and then I co-wrote a book with him. Uh, he was somebody that resonated with me and was giving me what I needed in terms of professional counsel on how to guide others in this civilian workspace. But that costs money to do that. And some of us, we've lived in military poverty for so long. It's hard when you have money, when you finally have some money, to recognize that, hey, you got to give a little bit of that back to your continuing education. Um, it could be conferences, it could be trade shows, it could be formal coursework or degrees. You name it, but you've got to be doing something. If you stop doing that, you're now in decline. Whether you admit that or not, you're not advancing anymore.
And that's huge with the way everything is going at a rapid pace. You have to keep yourself relevant. You have to stay with the times. I tell some of these young veterans that I had to learn for myself is I told myself I don't want to be the next blockbuster, right? Especially when Netflix is, like don't be. I tell myself, Kings, don't be the next blockbuster, right? Like you have to go with the changes and learn new ways of delivering yourself because you're bringing your talent to an organization. If you want to start your own business, you bring your talent to the industry, to your client, which is the client is the end user.
Well, I was advising a company yesterday it's been a family run company for 30 years. There's a young person in their mid 30s who's now the family. He's inheriting the company. They have over 20 million a year in revenue, half of which comes from DoD work. But they sell a product, and they sell products and they channel products for others. And as we've seen with technology evolves, and there's going to come a time when those products are not relevant anymore, and that time is going to happen in this person's uh, stewardship of the company. And so I was asking him, hey, I know you want more business, but you need to be thinking about how are you going to pivot this business into something new, because these capabilities won't be needed for that much longer. And I could look back over my observation of technology from the time I came into active duty until now and point out, things that are relics that are no longer used. And it was a light bulb moment for this, young owner of the company, that it's going to be on him to figure out what should we start winding this part down so we can build this other part up. But you have to let go of something that's pretty comfortable and that's making you a good living right now to do that. And same mindset about how you grow your own capability. You have to be thoughtful about what's next.
And what is next? And that's why we come to this. How do they get a copy of your book? Because I'm going to share with y'all. So just for the listeners that's out there on the pod, I know the ones that's watching, but for the listeners, just listen to how the chapters are broken down, because it's a checklist. Just think of it as a checklist. Gene will provide y'all a wonderful checklist. First one, map your way. Second one, find your guides. Then you want to keep your focus to implement planning. Then you want to get experience. Don't forget to build a great reputation. And you want to learn more about leadership. Don't forget to practice diplomacy and understand your organizations to take ownership and embrace growth. That's in the book.
They sound so obvious, and in a lot of ways they are. But for every veteran that's transitioning, it's going to unfold a little bit differently. There's some common themes as are outlined there. I tell my personal story, which is not all the glamour stuff and being a captain of a ship. It's some of the downside of being a captain of a ship, and some of the challenges that we learn to live through. Things don't always go great. I had a fantastic career, but it's not without some steps back and overcoming some things that happen in any career. And so it's I think it's a fair description of the realities of somebody who transitioned quite successfully into a fantastic life that I could not have imagined on the day that I made my retirement.
Thank you so much, Gene, for sharing your insight. Now, how can they get a copy of the book? Where can they reach out to you?
I failed to answer the question. So I do have I have an Amazon author page. If you go on Amazon and do Make Your Move Gene Moran, or if you do Gene Moran author, it'll take you right there. And for you, if anybody wants to contact me by email, I have a website, genemoran.com. You can shoot me an email. I'd be happy to send a signed copy of the book to the listeners if that's of interest. But it's readily available, and there's an audio format. Something unique about the audio book that I have learned from some others is that between each chapter, there's a mini interview with me by my publisher, Anna David. And she did a wonderful job of sort of highlighting some key points. So that's only in the audiobook. It's not in the written form, and it's not in the ebook.
Thank you. And before we leave, what is one takeaway you want everybody to leave with Make Your Move? The takeaway that I gained from this is don't be scared to step out.
Yeah, discomfort is part of the process, and it's only uncomfortable for a little while, and it may only be a day, it may be an hour, but push yourself and think much, much bigger than you're thinking.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S lifeline. We are here to help. And thank you for coming on the scoop, sharing the information, Gene, and greatly appreciate it. Until next time, everybody, take care.